Oh, here it is.
Chief, how are you doing? Chief Bellier? Oh, we got the other chief on as well.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, Ken, I thought you were talking to Mike. I'm doing well. How are you?
Good, thanks.
Okay, I'm going to record Zoom now. I'm going to start that.
Recording in progress.
Leon, we can't hear you.
We got it. Call the meeting to order for the American Canyon Fire Protection District for February 22nd, 2022. Please set the flag for the Pledge of Allegiance. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Roll call, please.
Board Member Joseph?
Here.
Board Member Oro?
Here.
Board Member Washington?
Here.
Vice Chair Abu Damos?
Here.
And Chairman Garcia.
Here. Thank you. For the public information, participation in the board meeting hearing is process is on the first page of the agenda. We'll repeat committee meeting remotely. Report on closed session, confirmation of reportable action.
I think that's probably you, Chief.
Yep.
This is me. So the board met with the fire chief, discussed potential salary numbers and evaluations, and we'll report back to that in writing to the board.
Okay, anything further? No further reportable action at this time. Proclamations and presentations are none. Public comment, open session items not on the agenda. Any public comment?
Justin Hamilton Hall is entering.
Okay. Good evening. Good evening, Justin.
Hi, Mr. Mayor.
Did a public comment?
Oh, this is a good time for public comment, or I have to wait?
That's just public comment on anything not on the agenda.
Okay. Well, I need to just say that it's time to get somebody out there and cut the grass down, because the hill had tall grass up there, and there are two hills in the mole, so before the fire come in.
Thank you. I do believe we had that on the calendar for as things begin to dry out. Is that correct, Chief?
Yes, thank you, Justin. Can you be specific and tell us what two hills you're talking about?
Sure, Chief. One is what Karen Dunmore, we're both to get new house. And then there are other hill that you're going to go to, going out 7. So the first hill is to the church, other hill will be done.
Okay.
All right,
Both sides of either Rio Del Mar or Carolyn,
Yes.
right.
out in the Rancho area.
All right, I'll go take a look at those. Thank you, Justin.
Okay. Anything further? If not, is there another speaker?
No.
Okay, we'll close public comment, move on with our agenda. Are there any agenda changes, board members? If not, I'll accept a motion for the consent calendar.
So moved.
Also,
Motion, who got the second?
David.
No, remember Washington.
All right. We do have a motion and a second, as long as the recorder gets it. Okay, roll call vote, please.
Board Member Joseph,
Yes.
Board Member Oro,
Yes.
Board Member Washington,
Yes.
Vice Chair Abudamos,
Yes.
Chairman Garcia.
Yes. Moving on to our agenda. We have no public hearing at this time. Business item. Number 7, fiscal year 2021-2022 budget review.
Thank you, Chairman Garcia. I will turn this portion of the meeting over to Ken Campo. He is our district finance officer and will present this portion of the report.
Ken?
Thank you. Thank you, Chief. Chairman Garcia, members of the board. Martha's going to pull up a PowerPoint presentation. And while she's doing that, I'll just mention that I'm going to briefly go through the mid-year budget update, if you will. You have much more information in your packet that we'd be glad to respond to any questions that the board members may have with respect to the information that's in the packet. Thank you, Martha. Next slide. So what I plan to do is present the monthly financial report through December. This is, and hopefully everybody can hear me okay?
That's fine.
Okay. This is you'll see the December report, but this is a report that is provided to the chief and other district staff each month as we progress through the year to keep them up to date on where the district stands vis-a-vis budget versus actual operating data. We have an updated financial summary that we'll present along with some proposed budget adjustments for the year. Then we have an updated long-range financial forecast to go over with the board, as well as an update on the unfunded liabilities of the district. This would be primarily the pension obligations and retiree medical. So next slide. So we'll just get into the monthly report. So this first graph is a look at the general fund reserves. And this should look familiar to the board. It's patterned after the long-range kind of forecast where we look at the amount of reserves, projected reserves, contingency fund, operating reserves, that sort of thing. So what we have here is going across the top two lines. One represents the prior year balance. That's the blue line going across. We have a green line that represents the current budget. So that's where we projected to be at the end of each month throughout the year. And you can see for December, we're right about where we expected to be. We have current reserves of about $5.6 million in total, comprised of, you'll see that brick portion at the bottom, which is the district's contingency or rainy day reserve amount, and then the blue portion at the top of that bar is basically the operating funds that the district has to carry it through the year and meet its monthly operating obligations. We're about $200,000 ahead of where we were last year. If you see the blue portion of the bar is above that blue dot. So So tracking right along about where we expected to be. Next slide, please. So this is a look at the general fund cash. And again, the same kind of lines going across. You have the blue line representing the cash balance where it was last year. And then that brown colored line is the current year. So we're sitting right about $5.6 million at the end of December. And you can see that the district used about $4 million to cover cash flow needs from about April of 2021 to November of 2021. So you can see there was about $4 million drawdown in cash, and that's why it's important to have that operating cash on hand. Otherwise, the district, would have to go out and borrow the funds to cover operations. Let me go on to the next slide. So this is a look at salaries and benefits. Again, we're tracking where we were last year, the blue line going across, with the current year, which is the brown line, and the green line represents the budget. So that's where we expected to be. And you can see we're above where we had projected to be in December. There's some reasons for that we'll talk about, but primarily, it has to do with overtime. So it's strike team deployments. You can see to the left there that the current year, there's about 232,000 of strike team related overtime in that actual figure. And overtime needed to cover vacancies and maintain that 6.0 staffing that was discussed in the report in your budget packet. Those will require some budget adjustments that we'll take a look at a little bit later. The district did increase staffing to try and address, those, that 6.0 staffing model. However, it does take some time to get the staff, the new hires through the academy deployed and actually counting toward staffing. So that took some time at the beginning of the year that resulted in some additional overtime costs. So next slide looks at just the overall expenditures of the district, and it's tracking, pretty close to where we thought we'd be in December. But we will be proposing some adjustments, some increased spending on a couple of items that we want to go over with the board. We'll do that in a couple of slides later. I think this may be our last slide for the monthly report, and this is just looking at the overall revenues for the district. You can see that the brown current line, we're a little bit ahead of where we expected to be, which is the green budget line, and ahead of where we were last year. You can see again the note to the left, the current year, the district through December has received about $184,000 of strike team reimbursements. That's a little less than half of what the district expects to receive for the year. And that'll be included in a proposed budget adjustment. And then you can see the red arrows that are pointing to those two property tax payments. So you can see the revenue really tracks along with those property tax receipts from the county in December and April. Okay, well, that's it for the monthly report, to give you a picture of where the district stands through 6 months of the year versus the budget. And now we'll get more into the budget review itself. And this is another slide that the district is hopefully familiar with. You can see the area to the left, columns to the left represent the general operating fund of the district, and you have the fire mitigation fee fund and the fleet facilities and equipment fund. These are the three funds that comprise the district's funds. So we start with the beginning fund balance, and then we have the revenues and transfers, budget and actual, as well as the overall expenditures and transfers going out. and then you have the revenue over and under, and then we have the ending fund balance at the bottom. So on the left of each of these areas is the actual audited fiscal year 2021 amounts. And then to the left is the final budget for 21-22 fiscal year, and then where we think we'll be at the end of the year, given the 6 months of actual data. So you can see from that revenue over under line, we expected to be in a deficit of about $389,000. That's now projected to be about $491,000. It's an additional $100,000. We have additional revenue of about $443,000. So we go from about 6.1 million budget to $6.5 million projected now. And that's primarily the strike team revenue that I mentioned earlier. It's about 443,000.
This
Yes,
is
sir.
related to the overtime for the strike team.
Yes, sir.
And then we expect to be reimbursed for that.
Yes.
Okay.
So it's the overtime costs plus some administrative overhead plus rental for the equipment that's out on the strike teams as well. So all of those three components factor into the revenue side of the equation. Expenses are up from 6.5 million to 7,056,000. It's about $545,000. So that's the additional overtime that we talked about for both strike teams and vacancies, and then some additional spending of about $100,000 that we'll cover in more detail. We're expecting for fire mitigation fee fund, there's no changes. Everything looks to be on track for that fund, as well as the fleet facilities and equipment fund. So we're not seeing any need to make any adjustments for those two areas.
The fire mitigation looks like we have a deficit there. Audited.
Oh, yes, sir. That was the transfer out to the fleet facilities and equipment fund last year.
Mm-hmm.
The transfer out was larger than the funds coming in.
Okay.
We just transfer whatever is needed to balance out that fleet facilities and equipment fund. So those expenditures will go up and down. You can see we're not proposing any expenditures for the current year, any transfers out to the fleet facilities and equipment fund. So we will accumulate funds there over time and then use them as capital expenditures are made.
Very good. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Okay, Martha, next slide is looking at the proposed adjustments. You can see at the top, we're proposing an increase in revenue, strike team reimbursement, $443,000. And then down below, you can see the increases that amount to $545,000 of additional expenditures. The net increase being $102,000. So that's why that you saw that $389,000 deficit, grew to $490,000 or so.
This is a good time to butt in for a question, or
oh, yes, sir. Yes, go right ahead.
And I don't recall what the original budget was in terms of the line item detail, but it seems to me that we should have budgeted for the full the extra 3 bodies. And yes, there's savings because of the delay in getting them on board. But by the same token, I guess what I'm trying to wonder is that the overtime for staffing versus the savings should have washed each other out, it seems to me. Or somehow, I guess I'm trying to wrap my head around how our deficit got bigger, and it looks like it has something to do with that transition on the staffing from overtime to permanent staffing.
Right. So if you look at this if you look at the first area, two line items, wages and benefits, there's actually savings there of about $350,000. That's being moved down to that overtime line. That's $418,000. So the savings from delay in hiring, getting folks on board, is being moved down to cover the overtime that was incurred to maintain the 6.0 staffing. And then after the folks were hired, I have to turn it over to the chief for how long they go through their academy before they actually start counting as staffing. But then you have the added cost of, you have them on board, they're in their academy, you're incurring that cost, plus you still have to fill those spots for the 6.0 staffing. So you kind of double up on the cost for a certain period of time. I don't know if it's 6 weeks, chief, or 8 weeks. I'm not sure what your academy is running these days.
Okay, so that's why there's an actual, it really does cost more to make that transition. But once the transition's done, theoretically, this kind of misalignment should go away. So this is a temporary cost of transition, if you will.
More or less. Even with the 2 extra positions, if you will, because it takes 18 for the 6.0 staffing.
Right.
Workers' comp, vacation, sick, strike teams, all of those things require, overtime to fill those.
Okay.
And then we're adding $375,000 for the strike team overtime that was incurred. But those first 4 items that all deal with personnel costs net out to $443,000, which is the amount of strike team reimbursement coming in terms of revenue. So those offset each other. So really the additional deficit, $102,000, are all of those items below wages overtime, below the $418,000.
Oh, okay.
The 2 biggest components are the contractual of $50,000 and $17,000. Well, let me back up. The liability insurance, the actual premium for the district's liability insurance for this year was $16,000 higher than what was budgeted. So that $16,000 just takes it up to what the actual liability premium is for the year. And as all other public agencies have been experiencing the last couple of years, that liability insurance just keeps climbing. The $50,000 under contractual is for the district, is for an updated master plan / standards of cover study, which will define the operational and capital needs of the district to serve the population at build out, if you will, build out of Watson Ranch, Broadway District, those sorts of things. So it's important to get that study done and updated. Last time we took a look at this, I think was, 2016, when Watson Ranch was first going through the planning process. And we were able to look at that and forecast that at that time, it looked like Watson Ranch, in terms of property taxes, fire assessment fees, and development impact fees, that was going to be sufficient to build that second station that was going to be needed and staff it with 9 additional firefighters. And there would be sufficient money to do that. But I think it's important at this time now to check in. We're 5 or 6 years later. Things are starting to move now. They're moving dirt. They're going to, start constructing these homes and commercial properties soon. So it's time to take a fresh look at that and make sure that, that we're still tracking along with having sufficient revenue to serve those projects as they develop. The $17,000 under contractual is for a fee study for the district, again, to make sure that for those fee-for-service programs that the district has, that the fees are sufficient to cover the costs of providing those services. So these would be plan reviews, new development activity plans for that sort of thing, along with annual inspections, the district weed abatement program, that all of those fees are in line with the cost of providing the services. So those are the kind of the large components of that $102,000 additional that the district is proposing. I don't know, Chief, is there anything you'd like to add on that?
I think you covered it pretty well. Thanks, Ken. Those two numbers there. I think what I'd like to just go back and say is that, the $102,000 net increase is, as Ken said, is really from the printing and publishing down to the computer software piece. The personnel costs associated with the increases that you're seeing there it's pretty much a wash based on the strike team reimbursement. So the number, the 102,000 is really being generated by and primarily by the liability insurance, master plan, and the fee study. And we're hoping the fee study is going to be less than the 17,000. We think that that we should be able to have that come in significantly less than that. But that's the plan right now.
Yep. That 17,000 is kind of an outside number.
Right.
Yep. Okay, so the next slide is looking at our long-range forecast. And just in total, this remains very much in line with the forecast that was presented with the final budget back in September. So there hasn't been a lot of change in that. You can see we're still projecting that deficit spending, although we were projecting a deficit in fiscal 2021, and it came in pretty much at break even. So pretty much break even between revenues and expenses for 2 years in a row there, 2019, 20, 2020, 21. And I would expect by the time we get closer to the end of 21, 22 that, we'll be a little closer in alignment and not at that, close to $500,000 deficit figure. If, history proves the same again this year. And just again, to remind the board, we did do that kind of that fiscal analysis of Watson Ranch and Broadway District projects, and it was showing sufficient funds there to serve those two developments. But again, I think it's important to get a fresh look at that. And you can see here that the revenue, the blue line going across the top, starts accelerating there and that coincides with Watson Ranch coming online. And that's the other thing I think we really need to take a close look at, is a lot of things have changed since 2015, and I'm certain the home prices, I know our costs are higher, but I'm certain the home prices are much higher. The projected home prices now are much higher than they were back in 2015. And again, just to remind the board, that brick area at the bottom is the 20% contingency or rainy day reserve fund. That's set at 20% of ongoing operating expenditures. And the blue wavy area is the operating reserve, that cash flow that the district needs to be able to meet its obligations throughout the year. And the green bars are as the projected ending fund balance in each of those years. So again, this is pretty much the same picture that we showed the board last September with the final budget. And in your packet, you have all the data that supports various elements of this chart. With that, that kind of concludes the budget update portion of the presentation. Are there any questions from the board at this point regarding the monthly budget to actual or the mid-year?
More of a couple of comments. Obviously, the running a deficit always makes you a little nervous, but it looks like we have at least two prospective, solutions on the horizon. The first, as you mentioned, is the Watson Ranch. The other one potentially is this fire tax being talked about that, we don't know all the details, but it sounds like our fire district will get a fair amount of money if it were to pass. And so if it passes in the near future, that might change things dramatically even before Watson Ranch kicks in. But I guess it's a comforting thought to realize we have two ways of getting ourselves into the black instead of being in the red. And both of them, Watson Ranch we know is going to happen. The fire tax, who knows? But it's comforting to have two ways of solving our financial problem instead of just one. So
yeah, I've not factored in anything on that tax, obviously, at this point.
Chief Cahill and I have been sitting in on all that and voicing our needs and concerns as well. You can imagine it's very different in the American Canyon than it's, say, for example, in North County, Calistoga, St. Helena, Yountville, parts of Nappy, and, with the impact of the wildfire on those communities. Ours is a different perspective of that. So we've been insisting that, this is something, should it pass, these are funds we could use for staffing levels, for facilities, for equipment if we needed that as well. So we would have a readiness capacity much better than we are right now in that event. It also goes with, I voiced also support for Newell to South Kelly. How are we going to get a fire apparatus north of American Canyon at a commute hour? It's going to be significantly delayed. And it's, so I mentioned all the mayors and fire chiefs say this is something that's beneficial countywide. So that would be our support for it and how we would use those funds to the betterment. I have a question though, where we have a deficit, we're using our operating reserve to fill in the gap.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, so we're not really in the hole at the end of the year. We're dipping down in our little savings stash there to cover the costs, so we end up paying up all our bills.
You see, you can go to, 2 or 3 more years before you start dipping below that capital reserve level that the board has established.
Yeah.
So that gives you time still to adjust, and things like this fire tax, could come into play.
Yeah.
Any number of things. The development could take off a little sooner than expected. Homes could sell faster. There's certainly, a big demand for housing out there right now.
Sure. We just want to make sure for the viewing public consuming this is that they understand that, there is money to pay the bills as we go forward.
Yep.
It's in our reserves. So it's why it's important to have the reserves.
Yes.
And particularly contingency reserve as well. Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Very good.
Always feel better when there's reserves.
Yes.
Okay, with that, I think we can move on to a discussion of the unfunded liabilities, Martha.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. So this is a look at the OPEB funding, the accumulation of assets, if you will, in the OPEB trust fund. OPEB being other post-employment benefits, and in this case, we're talking about retiree medical benefits. So that's what's represented here is assets that are being set aside in a trust fund to fund those benefits for employees, for retirees of the district. The funds are being managed by CalPERS. So this is a trust fund that's set up through CalPERS, and the assets are managed by the same folks that manage the pension funds for CalPERS. But point out here that you can see the dark blue area represents the accumulation of contributions that the district has made into that trust fund. The light blue area going across represents investment earnings on those contributions. And you can see as of December of 21, the district had contributed a total of $2.3 million and had earned $1.7 million to bring the total assets to about $4 million. And I made a little note up there in the corner that 42% of the accumulated assets as of December 31st were derived from investment earnings. And you can see a big spike there between 20 and 21. So last calendar year was, despite the pandemic, was very good in terms of investment returns. And that's not only for the OPEB trust, it's also on the pension side. We'll talk about that in a couple of slides as well. So next slide, Martha. Slide gets a little busy as well. It's the funding progress. So this is where we take a look at the liability, if you will, associated with these retiree benefits. And that liability is represented by the orange bar. And you can see that kind of growing over time, and then it's kind of been leveling off for the last 3 or 4 years. The blue bar represents the assets in that trust fund. So you can see in 2021, it's about $4 million that we just saw on the previous slide. The gray bar represents the unfunded liability. So that's the difference between the orange liability and the blue assets. And you can see that was growing for a period of time, and now it's declining. Another way to look at that is the funded ratio, which is the orange line going across the chart. And you can see that really growing and spiking up to 76%. So the district has enough assets on hand at December 31st to cover 76% of the actuarially accrued liability associated with the retiree benefits. So what this graph tells us, right, is that the liability is fairly stable. It's flattening out. The assets are going up as a result of contributions. The district is continuing to make its contributions every year, along with investment earnings. That results in that unfunded liability going down and the funded ratio going up. So the district is making really, really good progress toward reaching its goal of fully funding this important benefit for retirees.
And
So
David
next-
has his hand up.
Yeah, thank you, Martha.
Yeah, Director Oro, yes.
Yeah, thank you, Martha. Thank you, Mr. Campos, for this presentation. This is one I'm interested in because when I joined in 2017, I was like, ooh, how can we do this? And we did it through math and investments, I guess. And I'm really pleased to see this part. At what point do you think we will be fully funded, and do we want to get fully funded?
Yes, that is the goal. The district would be, if you follow the current amortization schedule, it shows like in 17 years, right? But that all depends on investment earnings. It's 17 years if you earn the projected 6% a year, 6.8% a year that they use in the actuarial study. But, you have a year like last year, you earn, 20%. So that shortens that period. So you could be, you could achieve that goal of 100% funded, barring any crash in the stock market or in financial markets. It could be much sooner than that. But that's kind of that's what's built into the model.
Yeah, I understand. So, but it's built in the model at 6%. So even projections now, we're thinking at like 6%.
Yeah,
Well-
I think it's actually like 6.8% for these, because these are much longer term investments.
Right. And so even then, if we meet the numbers, do we go into more a conservative model? Do we change our investment portfolio approach?
Yes. It's kind of like the, you know, you can be aggressive, moderate,
Yeah.
and then very conservative.
Yeah.
But
I mean,
the more conservative you get, the lower the projected earnings.
of course.
Because you're being more conservative.
Yeah, of course, I understand that, but also you're holding on to that cash that we've met.
But
What I
the
want
lower the assumed earnings, the higher the liability goes, right? Because you're not projecting to earn as much, so now you got to contribute more, if that makes sense.
yeah, and I
So
guess
there's a direct correlation between your projected earnings and your liability.
yeah, well, there's the it's that balance that we have to
Yep.
apply. You know, I would go for, you know, it doesn't have to be today or, but in the future, I think understanding the investment strategy here, maybe just kind of quickly recapping that, and then having the opportunity or getting your opinion and having the opportunity to decide when do we relook at that investment strategy to protect the
And start shifting down that scale. Yeah.
kind of thing.
Yep.
I'd love to have that conversation because
Yep.
it looked like we're getting close. And I recall us having that conversation. It was like, go for it, go make us some money. And look, you know, now we're getting there, and I'm like, this is good. And hopefully, you know, the market stays up, not just for us, but for everybody else on the planet. So.
But you know, the
and-
market's cyclical, so that's part of the problem as well.
Yep.
So, but yeah, it's my learning on this is you see the gray bars, how that went up. Well, that means if we're not getting enough, the investment is not producing what it should, then you have to contribute more. When you get over here to the right here, how the gray bar is shrinking, that means then you can consider lowering the amount that you have to contribute in the local jurisdiction into it, which means you have more in your operating budget. Joseph.
Obviously, the goal here is to get this fully funded and having the earnings start paying for the benefits.
Yeah.
Kind of like it does for the CalPERS retirement system, where they'll tell you, you know, 70 cents of every retirement dollar comes from investment earnings as opposed to contributions from the employer-employee. So that's kind of what we're shooting for here in the long run, is this to be more self-sustaining.
Rick and Joseph, go ahead.
Look, comments. Number one, when I looked at the chart, I thought, well, why did it go up and why did it stabilize, the accrued liability? And I'm thinking it's because, frankly, we had a lot of retirements, and now we have a much younger crew. And as a result, you know, the people who are retired are, you know, it's kind of become a fixed amount, so their retiree costs or their medical liability is going to stabilize. Is that a fair, big picture? Okay, good.
Yep.
And then that makes sense. And to that extent, as long as our liability kind of levels off, you know, contributions and asset earnings is going to get us closer to that 100%. So that's a good thing.
The other contributing factor is the rate of medical cost inflation.
Well,
If you recall, for a while there, it was 9, 10, 11, 12%, you know, and now it's, CalPERS has done a lot of work to stabilize those increases. So now they're in the 3 to 4% range as opposed to the, you know, 8 or 9% range.
The other one is on the investment strategies. Do we control how that money's invested, or is it kind of in a CalPERS and they're managing it?
They have 3 different strategies that you can choose. They got the aggressive, the moderate, and the conservative.
Oh, okay.
And I would say about 75% of the agencies that are in the OPEB trust fund, they're all in the aggressive strategy. They're all trying to ramp up the funding as quickly as they can.
So I would agree with Councilmember or District Member Oro that, as we start getting closer to 85%, it's time to recalibrate and moderate ourselves a little bit. So good.
Yeah, you just have to
this
be
is-
ready for the sticker shock, because
Yes.
when you drop
Yeah.
that assumed earnings, you're going to go from 80% funded, back to like 65.
Well, and that's what we want you to present to us, right?
Yeah.
Make that decision.
I want to taper
But
off.
you still
I
have the
wanna drop.
assets.
Yeah, yeah. Tapering is a better term, right? Drop off.
Tapering, yeah, there you go.
Well, right now, the interest would suggest that aggressive is working because take advantage of it while the market is where it is. And you're right, Director Oro, you need to be cautious at a certain level because it's not going to be rising to the moon all the time.
And
Be
And I-
tapering or quantitative easing.
because I think in the last 2 or 3 months, I don't think we've been earning 20%. So,
No.
but
Yeah.
definitely the good news is we're in a position where we can have that discussion. If we were in the 40 and 50% range, we'd be doing aggressive just because we had to. And, it's just not a good idea to be aggressive, nonstop. Sooner or later, you're going to hit a bump.
That's right. Actually, the news I saw today on the state's budget is the reserve is the benefit they've realized is a lot higher than they have reported, even so several $1 billion more. So, but the stock market is doing what it's doing. Ride it, but just be aware it's not going to be there forever. So you have
Yeah,
to find a
probably
way-
lost $1 billion in the last week.
Yeah.
I'm not sure how much, but it was quite a drop again today. It's like 400 points or something. I just point out that the actuarial valuation, if you will, for the OPEB funding for the retiree medical benefits, it's every 2 years.
Yeah.
So that's why you see these, these are laid out in 2-year increments. The last one was as of June 30th, 21, so it's fairly current. The assets are as of December 31. But the actuary also projects what that liability is for the next couple of years after that June 30, 21 liability figure. So we'll be able to kind of track this over the next couple of years until the next update is done. So that's the OPEB. The next one is more or less the same look, but at the PERS obligation. So these are the retirement benefits of the district employees. And so you can see the funding progress here. It's kind of laid out the same in terms of the graph and the information that you're looking at in terms of the orange bars being the liability, the blue bar being the assets, the gray bar being the unfunded liability, and the orange line being the funded ratio. Now this is all before the investment earnings of fiscal year ended June 30 of 21. That was the 21.3% earnings year. So this is CalPERS valuations lag by 2 years. They do them every year, but they're 2 years old. So the latest one we have here is 2020. Somewhere around September, October of 22 is when we'll get the fiscal 21 valuation that'll start picking up the 21.3% investment earnings. So what does this graph show us, right? It's kind of the opposite of what we were looking at with the OPEB. So here the orange accrued liability line is growing over time. Assets are growing, but the liability is growing faster than the assets. So that's why you see the growth in the gray bars, the unfunded liability. You can see back in 2014, the district was actually 78% funded, and then that funding ratio dropped dramatically. That's because of the increases in the accrued liability. And really, those increases are more attributable to the actions taken by the CalPERS board to, ironically, increase funding, right? They're trying to increase the amount of funds coming into the district. They changed the discount rate, which is the assumed earnings rate. They lowered that. You know, it used to be at 7 3/4 and 7% and 7 1/4. Now it's down to 7. They're dropping it further to 6.8% as a result of those earnings from last year. They changed some of the demographic assumptions, assuming retirees were going to live longer and require more assets to pay for those retiree benefits as they live longer. So they've taken a number of these steps to do this kind of purposefully. I'm sorry, Director Abadamas, you had a question?
Oh, I'm so sorry. Did I accidentally unmute myself?
I thought you had a question. I'm sorry.
Oh, no, I'm good. Thank you.
Okay, so here the liability is growing, as I said. So, you know, the assets are growing, but the liability is growing faster. So everything is kind of working in a different direction. But again, this is before the 21.3% earnings that you know, CalPERS would like to stabilize the contributions on the part of employers. That's been the employer's biggest complaint over the last decade or two, is that, you know, they're at the whim of these CalPERS rates that, you know, they're mandated to fund. So they would like to stabilize those, and the way you stabilize those contributions is, you know, lower like the assumed earnings to remove some of that volatility that we were just talking about in the markets. Unfortunately, that means, you know, they're going to stabilize rates at a much higher level than they would have, you know, if they would have continued to assume earnings in the 7 3/4 range. I got a couple of slides. I got another slide that takes a look at the impact of the changes that are coming as a result of that really excessive earnings that the district PERS was able to achieve fiscal year into June 30 of 2021. Like I said, they had wanted to lower the discount rate even further, but that would have had a really dramatic impact on employer rates. So instead, back in, I think, around 2017 or so, CalPERS adopted this strategy that said, we'll lower the discount rate if we are able to achieve higher earnings than what we project. And so they have a table that said, you know, if we project 7% and we earn 10, we can lower the discount rate by, you know, 20 basis points, or, you know, 5 basis points, if you will. If we earn between 10% and 15%, we can lower it by, you know, maybe 4 basis points. And so they have a chart, and last fiscal year, their earnings were, you know, in excess of 21%. So they went to the chart and said, okay, we can lower, you know, we can lower the discount rate by 20 basis points. So we can go from 7% to 6.8, because the higher earnings that we achieve will offset the impact of lowering that discount rate, and it won't have such a dramatic impact on employer rates going forward. So you can kind of see how that lays out down here on the safety rates, if you will. So the district has classic safety rates of 3% at 55 and 3% at 50. I believe there's only one employee now, that's maybe Chief Bellier, that's in the 3% at 55. The rest of your classic employees are at 3 at 50. And then Pepper employees, those are employees hired after January 1 of 2013. for safety, they're 2.7 at 57. And so you can kind of see PERS tried to project what was going to happen to these rates as a result of lowering the discount rate and achieving 21.3% investment returns. And so for the 3 at 50 employees, if you look at the median column, it's kind of the mid-range of what they were expecting, that by lowering the discount rate, the normal cost goes up, which makes sense because you're projecting less earnings, so you're going to have to contribute more in terms of the employer rate to make up for that. However, the impact on the unfunded liability, which is the UAL payment, that's the amortization, if you will, of the unfunded liability. Most of those excess earnings will go toward dropping that unfunded liability, so it lowers your payment. So overall, for the 3 at 50 employees, it's a break even or a slight drop, minus 0.1%, which is good. On the PEPR employees, however, there's really no unfunded liabilities associated with PEPR employees because they're fairly new. These are employees hired after January 1 of 2013, and they have a lower retirement benefit, and there hasn't been any changes really to impact that rate since 2013. So that's actually projected to go up by 1.5%. And the reason I kind of get down to this granular level of detail is the current makeup of district employees. The 21 safety employees the district currently has that it's paying these benefits for, 7 of those are 3 at 50 employees. Actually, 1 3 at 55, 6 are 3 at 50, and the other 14 are PEPR employees. So you can see overall the impact is not going to be as dramatic as if they just lowered the discount rate. So the combination of the lowering the discount rate and the additional earnings really kind of offsets each other. And that was kind of the goal of that strategy that the CalPERS board adopted. But it's important to kind of look down at this level of detail and then look at the makeup of the district's employee population to understand how this is really going to impact the district. And I should say that, these impacts aren't going to show up because of the 2-year lag of the PERS valuations. They won't impact the district's rates until, I believe, July 1 of 23 going forward. But we need to anticipate those things as we look ahead. So the next slide I have kind of combines this all into kind of one look at unfunded liabilities, kind of summarizes this. So the pension valuation was as of 12/31/20. OPEB was as of July 1 of 21. You should see the accrued liability. The total for both is $35.3 million. You look at the assets on hand, $25.2 million. So the unfunded liability is about $10 million in total. The funded ratio overall, when you combine both pension and OPEB, is 71%. You can see the amortization periods down below. If you stuck just with the actuarial report, the amortization period on the OPEB, it's about 17 years remaining to get that unfunded component paid off. With the pension, it's different. Each year, there's a different staunch, if you will, or tranche for each year. So it varies from 1 to 20 years remaining for pension. And again, just caution or just a note here that this is before seeing the impact of the 21.3% investment earnings. I think PERS is kind of projecting the impact of that 21% earnings is going to push the funding status overall for PERS up closer to about 80%. And I would expect the district's pension funded ratio will be closer to 80% than 70% in a couple of years.
Sounds like a good position to be in. Yes, good.
Yep. And that's kind of my brief but spectacular review of the unfunded liabilities of the district. And if there's no further questions on the information that's been presented, then the recommended action would be to adopt the resolution in your packet, which is 2022-05, approving the fiscal year 21-22 budget amendments that were reviewed earlier.
Any questions from directors at this point? Hearing none, have we had any public comment on this?
No, we have not.
Very good. Well, then we'll close public comment and return to the board. It's good to hear that we're going to be see the result of the 21% earnings when it comes up next year. I said on the, by the way, Vice Chair Abadamus and I had this information before us for the Finance Committee. I should have noted that ahead of this presentation. But I was sitting on the Governance, Transparency, and Labor Relations Committee for the Cal Cities. We had a presentation on this, a lot more extensive, but the same summary of this would point to they're expecting a better situation for a lot of cities on that. We're fortunate in American Canyon, given our ratios with respect to those who are invested in it. But the cautionary, I went through that series a few years back where it was like everybody felt like they were circling the drain on this whole situation. And then CalPERS did make some changes. They had down to 3-tier investment strategies that seem to be working better. Gives an opportunity to monitor it. I would suggest we need to monitor this returns very closely. It behooves us to do that. And it's good to see that we're in a much better position. But attentiveness will keep us there. With that, anybody else have a comment? If not, I'll entertain a motion for approval.
I'll make a motion if no one else has a comment. I'll make the motion to adopt Resolution 2022-05, a resolution of the Board of Directors of the American Canyon Fire Protection District approving mid-year budget amendments for fiscal year 2021-22.
I'll second.
Motion second. Roll call, please.
Board Member Joseph?
Yes.
Board Member Oro?
Yes.
Board Member Washington?
Yes.
Vice Chair Abudamos?
Yes.
Chair Garcia?
Yes. Thank you. It's good to know we're in a good position there. Moving on in our agenda, we have Chief Oral Report.
Thank you, Chairman Garcia. I'd actually like to turn, Jeff, you ready for this? I'm going to turn this portion of it over to Chief Bellier, and he's got a few things he'd like to share with the board this evening.
Okay, Chief Bellier.
Thank you, Chief, and good evening. A couple updates for you is I'm happy to report that our 4 probationary firefighters just last week and part of this week have completed their first phase of their probation, that what we refer to as their Mod 1 tests.
Mm-hmm.
All 4 of them are doing extremely well, really assimilating into the American Canyon Fire Protection District culture, and have already demonstrated that they're a great asset to the district. So they have a couple more milestones that they'll have to complete before they are off probation, but by all accounts, they're doing extremely well, and they're all on the road to be successful. In fact, last week we had the structure fire on Kimberly Drive, and 2 of our probationary firefighters, it was their first structure fire, and so they performed well and were able to apply all of the training that they've accumulated since joining the district into a real life scenario, and did very well.
Good.
Obviously, we did have the structure fire, was contained to the building of origin. We had 1 resident that we located as we were doing what we refer to as a 360 walk around of the structure as we first arrived. Resident was checked out by on-scene ambulance crew, no injuries, and was released at scene. Excuse me. We were very grateful for the mutual aid assistance from Vallejo Fire Department, Knapp County Fire Department, Napa Fire Department, as well as our ACERT members that came out and helped with traffic control for the duration of the incident. Also happy to report that last week we were able to facilitate having our engines go out to Wetlands Edge and drive through the speed cushions that were recently installed, and no issues on that aspect. It looks like the speed cushions are going to work for both the fire district's needs and also have the intended benefits of calming the traffic on Wetlands Edge. So that was a good thing for us, and it was a good teamwork and collaborative effort with the city's engineering department and street supervisor to get us out there and ensure that everything was working as advertised before they did install them, but worked real well for us.
Good to hear. I think a lot of the residents on Wetlands Edge are going to be very pleased with that.
Yeah, we're excited about it, and it was very, very neat to have something that's going to not impact our response time as much, but have the desired effect on the traffic calming. So we're excited to be part of that and work with the engineering department and streets to make that make sure it was going to work for all of us.
Yeah.
One last item is our master plan. We're pretty much almost complete with all the supplying the consultant with all of the requested data. Hopefully we'll have that buttoned up here rather shortly, and then we'll move on to the next phase, which will be the in-person stakeholder meetings as the consultants continue to move forward with the master plan, but completely on schedule as so far in the process, and again hoping to have that completed document by this summer to be able to present to the board. That's what I had for my updates. I'd be happy to answer any questions that the board may have on that.
Well, thank you for the update. Good to hear about our probation firefighters out there. We'd like to see people succeed. Thank you.
Yeah, we're very happy to have them.
Questions from the board? Well, Chief Billy, thank you for your report.
Thank you very much.
Moving on then, if there's nothing more from Fire Chief oral reports. Seeing none, hearing none. Chair, board comment, committee reports, future agenda items. Anything from the board at this time?
Chair Garcia, the only, I am curious to see how those fire tax discussions are going. Maybe in the context of adding it to the fire chief's report, maybe for next month.
Good thought, yeah.
Something like that. Just, it's one of those things that could be significant as far as our financial picture is concerned, and politically, fraught with all kinds of uncertainty, because when you're asking people to support a tax increase, the assumption should be it's going to be a no, and how do you get to yes? So
yeah,
general discussion would be handy.
TKL.
Sure. If I could just add a little bit of color to that, if you'd like. We have been working with the county for several months now, talking about this potential sales tax increase that was primarily directed towards doing fire risk reduction and mitigation with respect to the wildland fire issues in the county. We have been successful. When I say we, I think the fire chiefs and the city managers and the mayors of the cities have been successful in getting the county to massage its proposal to include additional revenue to the local government entities and primarily for enhancement of fire protection in those jurisdictions. In addition to addressing the county's need for its wildland mitigation program. We're not there yet. I think there was a lot of effort early on by the county to push this proposal so that it would be on the June ballot. Just over the course of the last couple of weeks, they've pivoted, and now we're talking about the November election and not the June ballot. So we're not there yet. There's still a considerable amount of negotiations that has to take place between the county and local government. But we're on the right path, I think. I think Chairman Garcia would support that.
Yes.
There's been a lot of work done, certainly on the parts of the mayors and the fire chiefs, and the city managers, frankly, to get the county to look at this proposal a little more holistically, I guess is the best way to put it, and try to address the fire protection needs of the county with this proposal. So anyway, that being said, we're not there yet by any means, but we're getting closer, and hopefully we'll have something more to be able to share with the board at our March meeting.
Felt very top down at the beginning. I think working with mayors and top down from the county's perspective to us, and working with mayors and city manager, fire chiefs, pushing more from the bottom up. You know, what are the particular needs? Understand what the needs are. The smaller communities based on, say, a larger community like Napa, for example, American Canyon. These are the issues that are less impactful to us. We don't have the wildland scenario that Calistoga has. So how do we make this something that is palatable to voters in American Canyon? So is this that negotiation back and forth that Chief Cahill's talking about? So yeah, I think the last meeting was a discussion on, well, push it for June. Is that okay? Look, we're not really there yet, and being able to make a persuasive campaign, if you will, for the voters, it's going to take time. And it looked like November is a better opportunity if we can paint the picture of here's a necessity, here's a benefit. This is why it works for all of us. And you know, some jurisdictions there was a percentage rate that was too small for, say, Yountville, Calistoga, St. Helena. So the idea was, okay, then you give them a fixed amount. You know, you're not going to be able to do much with $60,000 on a percentage basis. But if you give a larger number, okay, now it's impactful to them. They can take that to their voters and say, this is what I can get for this amount of money. This is the benefit to the smaller jurisdictions. And likewise for us, for American Canyon, you know, what do we need to do? Well, we need to be able to respond. That means we need to have apparatus, we need to have staffing, we need to have facility support. And that's our argument. So, yeah, little by little, we're chipping away at it. And it's feeling a little more successful. But as Chief Cahill says, we're not there yet.
If I could add, I think it's been interesting to watch the process. And I think Leon hit on it. It was very much top down. And it started out very much top down from the county to us. And I think we've had the opportunity to kind of to change that perspective on a number of levels. And Mr. Ross reminded me that the attorneys were also involved in some of that. So I guess I should tip my hat to Bill and those folks who keep us out of trouble with the law. But there's, you know, I think one of the things that we've worked really hard on is getting the fire chiefs in the county to kind of stand united with respect to this and try to direct the focus of something like this. Because if it's going to pass, it's going to have to take all of our support. And you know, if the city of Napa isn't going to support it, it's not going to happen because the voters are there. And certainly, if the American Canyon doesn't support it, the voters of American Canyon don't support it. It's not going to go for the county either. So, I mean, I think this is what we've got folks realizing is that we all have to work together in this to make it to make it something that the voters will support. And so we're headed in that direction. We're not there yet, but we're headed way better. We're in a much better place right now, going in that direction. So,
At times like this, I follow the very guiding words of Mick Jagger.
Yeah.
You can't always get what you want.
Yeah.
But if you try real hard, you might find you get what you need.
Yeah.
And that's kind of where we are. That's the attitude I like to carry forward. Anything further, Chief?
I see Beth Marcus is showed up on the screen. I don't know if
Oh, yeah.
she has a comment or she's just watching this end of the meeting. So,
Good evening, Beth.
I'm just watching.
okay, good. Well, it's nice to see. It's nice to see you there.
It's nice to see you.
Thank you.
We've missed you.
Anything for board comments, committee reports, future agenda items? If not, then Board of Directors, we have concluded our business for the evening. Thank you very much. We are adjourned.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Ken. Appreciate everything you did tonight.
Thank you.
Thanks, good job.
Good night, folks.
Good night, thank you.
Right.